If you or anyone else you know is in the market to buy or sell a home, make sure you visit ccrealty.org today. We are the only real estate brokerage that donates 50% of its commissions to nonprofits dedicated to fighting climate change, and we operate in all 50 states. Enjoy the podcast. Suhaila, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Hey, Ethan. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. Thank you for fighting for our future. I really appreciate it. And, we always like to get this show started with a little bit of background on who you are and how you got to be doing what you're doing at the current moment.
So I'm Suhaila Cotton. I am a 10th grader currently, and I've lived in Boston, Massachusetts for 7 years, but recently moved to Cambridge. And so I live on the coast. And yeah, I've gotten involved with some youth climate stuff because of the high school I attend now, Phillips Andover, which is a private school in Andover, Massachusetts. Um, and yeah, I got a lot into the youth organizations here.
Cool. So you say you got involved because of school, or was someone kind of saying like, hey, you should get involved, or is it kind of something that you were like drawn to naturally?
I would definitely say I was brought into it and like shown and guided first off um, into the org. It wasn't really something I found on my own.
Was not something who guided you into it then?
It was the kids at my school. Uh, climate organization. I mean, climate club. They started. We call it PASC, Phillips Academy Sustainability Coalition. It was actually recent. Like it was only around for a year until like I entered. And so the kids who like led that, they like sent out an email to all the incoming ninth graders to join like the PASC. And I just like once I got into it, they were like, "Oh yeah, you should join these." It was really a like you do this and like you learn by doing, and not like, "Oh, this person's more experienced, let them do it." But they really just wanted people to try it out and like take responsibility for stuff, which helped me learn a lot really quick.
Which is awesome too, especially if you like take responsibility at a young age. Some of these old people still don't have any sense of responsibility. Well, I'm glad you say you were brought in by your peers, because I like that better than like some teacher or some like adult kind of telling you, hey, you should go do this. The fact that you were brought in by like other like students, I think is at least I'm cool with that. I don't know. I like people to kind of come to their own conclusions. Do you want to tell me a bit how climate change is kind of affecting your life today as a high school student?
Yeah, I would say because I live on the coast, one of the big things in when people talk about climate change is the sea levels rising. And for me, that is a big thing because being a coastal city, like if and when like it floods, my family doesn't really have like the resources to be able to move or at least bring a lot of our stuff with us. And I know like my community and neighborhood, like the people there, they also wouldn't be able to move easily. And it's not only that, like just having to leave like the place that you know, the community you've built, leave that in itself is like no one wants to have to do that, and people are already doing that. But that's just one of the big things for me. One of the reasons why I want to help fight.
Because of sea level rise and displacement. Okay. So when you think of like the idea of climate action, what does that really mean to you personally? And how do you think that's different from like what you see on the TV or in like the public sphere? Or is it the same thing? I'm not sure.
Yeah, for me, climate action. What I've been doing, I feel like it's a lot of like reading and lobbying, which is yeah, reading the bills and like figuring out and like talking, trying to persuade your representatives or legislators um, to sign on to something and organizing, which I feel like it's different than the public sphere because a lot of the things highlighted are rallies and like speeches, and I feel like I kind of categorize it between like lobbying, which has been mostly online because of COVID, which is like the online work and having to organize people there. And then
Mhm.
the stuff on, I feel like in the public sphere is more of like the physical work, which I haven't had a lot of experience with yet, but would like to.
Gotcha. So you're reading the bills, huh? I don't even know if the legislators are reading the bills that are coming out, but
I know, yeah.
so why don't you tell me about ACL? What is it?
Yeah, ACL is the Andover Climate Lobby. And
Hmm.
so I mentioned PSC, which is like the umbrella term for like a bunch of different clubs connected to just like climate action. And so ACL is the lobbying part, and what we do is we have like 20, 30 kids who are um, like consistently active and like helping out with um, especially like in lobby weeks, which we do through the youth orgs like our climate and Mike, which is Massachusetts Youth Climate Coalition. Um, and it's also like helping spread the word um, around campus about events or like maybe people need to petition something. And also education. Education, I think it's talked a lot about in the youth orgs that I've like been able to be in, and like how important it is. And so we like also work to educate new like incoming kids like on what lobbying is, and then also like try to run events for the school for people to learn.
Do you ever find it weird that you're like lobbying the government to change the laws, but like they won't even let you like vote on who's elected until you're 18?
I mean, I actually it's a good question that you bring up because um, coming in, I was told like youth, like, well, by our adult coordinator and some of the other adult lobbyists that I worked with, that like, oh, being a youth, you know, you're very like impactful, and they're surprised that you're here, and like that has an impact. I mean, and it was true. Like the first lobby meeting I was in, they sent a thank you, you know, and then the staff that we met with, like, they were like, "Oh yeah, we appreciated meeting with you as well," and like they gave me a shout out about like how they were surprised that such a young person was there. Um,
Yeah, it's super badass. It
thank
is.
you. Um, but yeah, I think yeah, it stands out, and but it's still like there's still like a lack of seriousness that I think that they give us. Because as youth, they kind of like they think like, oh, you might not follow up or like you don't really care. But we do, so you have to show that a lot.
If anything, I feel like your perspective is more valuable because it hasn't been tainted by the harshness of reality. Now, someone might take it the other way and be like, that's kind of what you need to have a more pragmatic and realistic view. But I feel like
Mm,
we need more well, I guess this is my we need more idealists in the world, and I feel like young people are more likely to be ideal, and they're less likely to have a bias of like a hustle kind of, I need to like feed the family, so that's in the back of their mind with all their decisions, whereas kids don't really have that. They're just like, this world is here, I'm enjoying it, like how can I make it better? Those are just some of my thoughts on that. Do you want to tell me about our climate and how you got involved with that and what you do as a field rep?
Yeah, so with our climate, I was introduced to it by ACL and the students there. And I originally started out like just a volunteer, which is like someone you just show up to the meetings and like you're not like you don't need to go to them, but you're like you just hop in and sign up for whatever actions or like events that are going on. Um, and in our climate, it's really just like a distribution space and communication space to learn about like things that are going on, like campaigns that people are running or other like clubs or youth orgs are doing. And as a field rep, you're supposed to go to the meetings that happen every week. Um, and we have this system called accountability buddies, and that's just like your pair with another person to also have meetings like maybe bi-weekly, just to make sure that you guys keep up with the work that you said you do.
Well, you're laughing a lot while you're saying that.
I mean, yeah, because I feel like the term accountability is so, it's really useful,
It's youthful, but it's also like necessary. Like for so I sell real estate, right? And my friends still like we go out and we knock on doors to try and like get clients and build business. And it's really hard to like stay accountable to your goals. And I mean, I used to have what was it? Yeah, I think we just called it buddies. Like at summer camp, you'd have like buddies when you go swimming, and you have to, and they would like whistle and be like, "Buddies, 1, 2, 3, count off," and we would have to do that. But it is like really like when you know someone, even if it doesn't have to be like a teacher or anything, if someone is like watching you, you're so much more likely to do something because you said you're going to do it because you're
Hmm.
held accountable to them. It doesn't matter what age you're at. I think it's still really relevant. Like I'm saying, I'm 24 and my friend is like 37 and he still texts me. He's like, "Hey man, you out there hitting the doors today?" And I'm like, "Yeah." Like, "You hitting the doors?" He's like, "Yeah." And then it just makes it so much more likely that that'll happen. So do you want to tell me a bit about the specific legislation that you're lobbying for? And then you're telling me you're reading the bills. So what are they saying?
Yeah, so well, recently we just had a joint rule 10-day lobbying week, which is
Cool.
like long story short is like when bills are reviewed in the committees and like the legislators can vote whether they can move on from committee and then be voted by the whole or they die, or like and don't move on. And some of the bills that we try to focus on, we call them environmental justice bills.
Hmm.
And some of them were like the air quality bill, which is to get like air filters in um, high like polluted areas, neighborhoods, and they take like 95% of the like toxic particles out of the air because they have severe health effects, and disproportionately communities of color and low income communities face these because of siding laws, and they don't get siding like able to tell like factories that they can't be built near these apartments or schools. Um, and then we also another one was the Building Justice with Jobs Act, which is like for a just transition
Hmm.
um, for workers like in fossil dependent jobs or ones that are connected to the fossil fuel industry. Like they can get education and training to go into cleaner jobs.
Right.
And um, I think those ones are some of the big ones that we've done. But yeah, it's hard because in the Journal 10-day, we were mainly trying to lobby for like the chairs of the committees, but you also need to ask like the other legislators like to convince the chairs,
Mm-hmm.
like to pass that. Um, and so it's a lot of networking, like with people, like figuring out what your legislator, like who your legislator is, and like, or are they the chair? Are they in this committee? Like, who can they ask? Who can they pressure? Like, if they can't, if like just them co-sponsoring isn't enough.
So, based on your experience right now, could you ever see yourself getting into politics and being those legislators or people on the committee?
I would say it's a little too messy for me.
Same, dude.
Just like trying to learn about like the process. I'm just like not for me.
That's like the scary thing to think about is like it seems like such a shitty job. It's like who's going to be left to actually do it, and that's kind of what we're seeing right now. Is you get leads like the best people are all going into like private industry or doing something else that's actually not just awful. So it's a
Yeah.
bit concerning. But you know, they're supposed to be representatives of the people. Um, Off the top of your head, I mean, what do you think makes it so difficult to get these climate laws passed? What do you think is the big challenge that we face on that front?
I think it's the mindset around climate change. Um and the big thing is like at least through my experience, like it's seen as a joke to most people, like not a big concern. And like people think like, oh, it's all about planting a tree or like saving the turtles, because that's like the big memes or jokes about it. And like that mindset in the like society, like that transfers to how like legislators take the seriousness of these bills, um, and whether or not they want to like they feel like it's justified to spend like so much money, millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars on these reforms. And that's one of the big things we hear, like, oh, there's not enough support, or like not enough support for like having this reform. And I think another thing is also like, as we were talking about like environmental injustice, like a lot of the effects of climate change or like disproportionate like distribution of like resources is in communities that these legislators are not from. And so it's not, most of them don't really have that personal connection.
Yeah. Though that's a fair point. So you said you're in 10th grade, right?
Yep.
So you're doing like algebra 2 and biology and stuff right now? Is that right?
Yeah. Yep.
That sounds terrible. How do you have like the motivation to also do this? What is like motivating you to add extra work onto what you have to do already? Which, by the way, is like really hard. I don't know if unless you become like an engineer, that's like the hardest stuff you ever do. I don't. I'm business. I was easy, but yeah, that stuff is still gives me nightmares. That stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I'm actually taking physics and I hope maybe
Right.
to become an engineer. But I think like it's definitely like an ebb and flow process. And I've seen it a lot like in the organization, like people come and go, and then come back um, and then find other spaces because it is draining, and hard, like losing sleep and um, not working on a homework assignment because I gotta read this bill. I gotta send all these emails trying to get these people, like other people, to RSVP and like sign on or get them trained. Um, and so you do have to make sacrifices for it, and it's hard. And for the lobby week that we just had, J10 Day, I was on like the lead youth organizer, and like that drained me because you
Totally.
have to prepare. It takes like 2 to 3 months like to prepare. So like it was in January and we started in like November and or like late October, and then so after it hit, I was like I had to take a month off. I was like, oh my gosh.
Woo.
Yeah, whoo, yeah. Um, but then you come back like there's
Mhm.
because there's still stuff to do, surprisingly, not surprisingly. But like, there's always more stuff to do. There's always, because even with the lobby week, like most of the bills that we were lobbying for, they didn't get voted out of committee, but they didn't get voted down, so they got postponed. And so it's following up with the chairs of the committees and like trying to persuade them, like, yo, like you gotta vote for this. Um, and a lot of people have been doing that work. Um, and so yeah, it continues. But that's also why like there's just like constantly outreaching, like to get new people to continue the work.
But it really does make a difference, like when you call your representatives. Like I think I recounted a story maybe a month ago where I called my representative and they called me back and they're like, "Hey Ethan, just want you to know like this bill that you called about, we're supporting it. We made it happen." You might have been doing it already, but they are supposed to be representatives of the people. If you speak to the right representative, they will really take into account what you say. So I mean, I just thank you for doing this work because it really does make an impact. Do you want to tell me about how your team has kind of helped support you when you're like trying to take on this big workload?
I mean, yeah, I think the one of the big things I learned was delegating and like trusting in your team. I was lucky. I'm lucky, like to be in a space where there's like just so many great people and kids. Like we're able to do a lot. Like if I just like reach out for help. Um, and so I've had a lot of great like people to help me out. Like if I didn't understand a bill or like what are their thoughts on it. And like discussing what our next step should be. Like Evan, our little coordinator, and then um, I had other youth help me in the J10 day. Um, and the space, like the meetings that we have like every week, I find it a supportive space because it's like usually there's always like a consistent amount of people who go. And so like we get to know each other pretty well.
How important do you think it is for like people who aren't adults, who are like under 18, to be like engaged in this stuff and working on like climate action or different social issues?
I mean, yeah, I think it's so important to get our voices heard and like to know how we can do that. Because before like being introduced to lobbying, I was like, you mean I can call my representative? Like I can actually talk to them, like email them? That was like that never occurred to me.
Hmm.
And like that's something like people need to know that they can do. And it's also the fact that you hear a lot in like big speeches, like think like United Nations, like people always say it, like, oh, the next generation, like this is their future, like it's on them, and it's like, okay, well, and like they say that, and like we still don't see a lot of action being taken when they're the ones currently with the power. So I guess like if they can say that, then better let the next generation start handling the issues,
Ooh,
which
good point.
yeah, which youth can do.
Hey, if it was up to me, I would let kids run the world. I think they have the best perspective. The less the more I don't know. I just remember I really really struggled being a kid, being under 18. I really didn't like the idea of being someone else's property where you're not allowed to make your own decisions. And I really think that you don't need to know everything. I feel like you can really feel things out in life. I've led that way, and I always say I try to keep the childhood energy going as long as I possibly can, because it's just more fun. I mean, what's the point of like getting in a suit and like being all like, just hating what you're doing? You need to enjoy yourself. And I think that's something that people who haven't had like burdens put on them yet can really do. But I still think it gives you like a lot of clarity in many ways. Because and then when you get older, you realize. I mean, you don't know anything as a kid, and then you think you know something, and then what you really need to realize is that nobody knows anything. So there's really no difference between a kid or an adult. We're all just learning new things every day. That's just what life is. So speaking of learning, what do you think you've learned the most from like your work on climate action or your experience with your peers?
Yeah, I think the big thing I've taken away is just being able to work with people. Um, and that means like not everything that you believe is right. Like that's not going to be everyone's first choice
Right.
or plan. Um, so it's learning how to like maybe sometimes you have to take a step back, modify like what you wanted to do, and also work around like other people's schedules. Um, and also, it's something I'm still working on, but like being confrontational, and not trying to like go with the flow because going with the flow doesn't get you a lot of places, and that means like sending maybe you have to send another like follow up email with people if they
Definitely.
didn't respond, and to your legislators if they haven't done what they said that they would do when you met with them, and it's things I'm still learning because it's like, oh, I don't want to be seen as annoying, but like sometimes you gotta if you're gonna hold people accountable to do what they said they were gonna do, or if you need them to show up.
Yeah, you got to be the accountability buddy for the legislators too.
Yeah.
Sometimes they forget. That's super big, and you can never send people enough follow-up emails until they finally get the message. I could say I definitely attest to that. So, well, you're really cool. Who are some of your biggest inspirations and role models?
Yeah, I think within OC, our climate, some of the people like that really wowed me, especially with the recent lobby week, was Julia, and she was a kid from also a private school in Massachusetts, but like just the amount of work she was able to like take on, like when I always reached out for help, like she was always there, the first, like one of the first ones, um, to be like, oh yeah, I got you. I don't know how she did it, because I was like, I know you got schoolwork too,
Mm-hmm.
and then Swapnil, he's like on every call, and also him and Julia are fellows, and for fellows that means like they go to all the OC like Massachusetts calls, but they also have to go to the um, national calls, which they're on the same day. So it's like 2 hours straight with the Zoom calls, just like talking about stuff. And hold on, let me roll down my blinds real quick.
Yeah, roll down your blinds. I love that. I love your response. I love that when I ask you who's your biggest inspiration, you start talking about your peers. I think that's so cool because I expect, I don't know. I think about like, I don't know. I mean, I talk about like Ray Dalio and Simon Sinek. They're like older than me, but yeah, I love that you talk about your peers. Anyways, keep going.
Yeah, and I think those two are definitely big ones, and then also, I guess I'll say one last one. There's so many. Ala, she did a lot to bring in discussions on like race and class into the space.
Mm-hmm.
Because while we're fighting for like environmental justice bills, it's also important to for people in climate action spaces to um, see their place like in society and like in the movement, and that means talking about like what are the privileges I have, what are the obstacles I have, and really acknowledging like what is your like place in the movement and how your space like is functioning, and like whether it's supportive and like really representative of the bills that you want like are fighting for, or like you need to work on some things.
Totally. All right, so you've got like the worst year ever of high school coming up next year. You've got the SATs, and then you
Oh
got the
my
college
goodness.
admission stuff. So that's going to be horrible. But so what are your plans? What are your plans for the future after that? Any idea? You mentioned something about maybe pursuing engineering. Where's your kind of mind at the moment?
I mean, yeah, I'm looking into engineering. I think um, because yeah, I'm taking physics and I want to be good at it because I have a twin sister, Sakina. She's taking chem, so I was like, okay, you do your thing, let me do mine.
Nice.
So hopefully I do that. But it's also because I think engineers, it's it's a good paying job, and I do need to like support my family. Um, but it's also something I think about a lot because like climate action, like you don't get paid for it. Like all the youth in my organization, like none of us are getting paid. But there's a big bill in coming up in MA legislature right now actually, that everyone's like talking about because there's like a grant to like pay youth organizers, which people are trying like to get the legislators to co-sponsor, but as of right now, no one is like being kind of like rewarded or like acknowledged enough for all the work that we have to put in, and it's something to think about because as an adult, I probably can't like focus on climate action as like my main thing. I do have to get a job that pays well for my family. And but like I won't entirely drop it. And I'm also looking into like maybe doing like some like continuing lobbying, continuing that work, but also like getting more into like the physical, like the physical work in action too.
What do you mean by like the physical work?
Like protesting or like organizing rallies and which are done. Like you have Friday for Futures, and in Massachusetts they've started like organizing some rallies too. But like I haven't participated that much in them, and so something I'm gonna maybe look into more.
Very cool. Well, you might be surprised by the time you're getting into the job market, you might be able to do an engineering job, or you definitely can do an engineering job that is directly related to climate action. It's something we can talk about after the podcast if you're interested. But well, Suhaila, thank you so much for the work you're doing. It's really cool to taking the initiative, and I love that you're already thinking about supporting your family. It's beautiful. Do you have any like final pieces of advice for other young people who are passionate about like seeing a more positive future or helping to build a better world?
Yeah, I think my advice is if you can, there's a lot of power in being able to work with a group, and you get a lot of work done by delegating and just being able to throw ideas around and discussing like what your next step should be, what bills are interested or like being thrown around right now, and it's yeah, there's a lot of good things that can happen. Like it's more effective. But even if you don't have a group, being able to share your story or like um, the reason why you're passionate about climate action or something in it, like that can also like help change people's mindsets around climate change, which is something really needed to get more support. And just being able to change someone's view, that's a lot of change in and of itself.
Indeed, it is. Very wise words. Well put. All it takes is one person to change another person. And yeah, cool. Very good. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me on the podcast. Keep up the great work and good luck with the SATs. That's terrible.
That's for next year.
She's
That's
like,
for next
she's
year,
like, I'll worry
man.
about it next year. Cool. Very
Yeah.
good. Thank you so much. Keep it up. All right, everybody. See you on the next one. So if you or anyone else you know is looking to buy or sell a home anywhere in the USA and would like to create thousands of dollars in donations without any cost out of pocket, please visit ccrealty.org today.